I can't make anything better. Anyway.
I'll jump on if you need it.
Oh yeah, the last slide.
Yes, okay. I'll just hop on.
Yeah. Don't start now. I'm like, yeah. I've got okay, we're going to stop. Sorry, stop. So our next talk is Matt Neal, who's an area manager within the Ranger Service at the National Park, and this is a project that we're currently developing, and it's quite there is some overlap with what we're doing with Active Travel, and the Active Travel plan, but there's challenges that Matt will talk about in embedding this into the Active Travel plan, and this is quite interesting. Everything that we've kind of gone through today and looking at the Peak District and what the Lake District National Park are doing, you know, we don't have those greenways or those disused railways, greenways and multi-user routes like other national park authorities have and other local authorities, but we do have that railway infrastructure that could be utilised for that, and this is looking at that, and also Sushans will talk about the Loon Valley work as well, which is another dismantled railway. So I'll hand you over to Matt.
Thank you, Rob. As Rob said, as you can see, my name's Matt Neal, and I'm the area manager for the Northern Dales. I look after the ranger team that look after the rights-of-way network, primarily in the northern parts of the national park. So it's not working. Stop working for me, Rob. Cheers. Just a bit of background to what we do, because the national parks are all slightly different in terms of how they manage access and the levels of involvement they have with access. We're the delegated highway authority from North Yorkshire Council, Westmoreland and Furness Council, and Lancashire County Council. So we manage the rights-of-way network on their behalf within the national park. That's about 1,500 miles or so. And we have about 20,000 items that we maintain: stiles, gates, bridges, signposts, information boards, and all the rest of it. The list just seems to get longer and longer. And we primarily do that through our own staff. So we have about 25 rangers, give or take. And from time to time, we use specialist contractors for larger projects or just where we need to get in extra resources. This was a project we completed last year. This was a bridge and a bridleway forward crossing on a bridleway that got washed away in major flooding back in 2019, and it was the last of 13 river crossings that we replaced. Go back in. So I'm just going to talk about Hawes to Garsdale and our project that we're looking forward to hopefully implementing at some stage over the coming years. A little bit of background: the Hawes to Garsdale section formed part of the Wensleydale Railway, and the Wensleydale Railway opened in 1878, and it linked the East Coast, what we now know as the East Coast Main Line at Northallerton, through to the Settle Carlisle Railway, which obviously comes up from Leeds to Skipton, Settle Carlisle, and then up towards up into Scotland. It's about 40 miles length of passenger and freight railway that opened there. That was all running well until the beaching cuts, and the railway closed to passenger traffic in 1959 and freight traffic in 1964. In its heyday, there was a daily milk train from Hawes down to London. So, you know, it was quite an important route at the time. It was actually operated both by Midland Railway and North Eastern Railway, and they had a joint station at Hawes, which is quite interesting. You get a variety of architecture from both those railway operating companies at that site. That was Hawes Station back in the day, and that's Hawes Station as it is today. And that's a site that's owned by the National Park Authority. So we operate a car park there. We've got a National Park Visitor Centre. We've got a small ranger base, and we also lease part of the building that operates as a cafe, and that's a bike themed cafe. You can hire bikes from there, and they've got a sister shop in Hawes, a full size bike shop as well. So we've got a nice facility there. Okay, so all of that 40-mile section of railway line, it's currently still operating as a railway line for about 20 miles. So from Northallerton up to Redmire, which is the National Park boundary. I'll just flip back actually, and you can just get your bearings. So the bit really in purple is still operating as a railway line, and the Wensleydale Railway Association have been operating that route since about 1990. Prior to that, it was used by a local quarry and used by the MOD to transport armour up to Catterick Garrison. Wensleydale Railway Association took that on from Network Rail, or from Rail Track as it was, and as I said, they now operate that. They've got a vision to try and link Redmire back up to Garsdale. However, over the last 20 years, there's backpedaling probably makes it sound a little bit formal really, but there's been a realisation that due to the operating costs of actually running a railway from Northallerton there up to Redmire, they've struggled with some elements of that. It's been expensive. And so they've actually sold on some assets that they owned between Redmire and Hawes particularly, to put funding into actually operating the Heritage Railway, primarily with sort of diesel railway units. Over the last few years, there's been another group called the Upper Wensleydale Railway that have formed, that have been looking at developing Hawes to Garsdale as a railway. Not with a view to run it as a heritage line, but with a view for it to be used by a train operating company. So very much as it was back in the day, the Settle Carlisle would run trains from Garsdale Station down to Hawes. Back in 2020, they put in a bid to the government's fund, which is entitled Rebuilding Our Railways. And as a result of that, it ended up about 70th on their list of priorities. So that's really going to be a non-starter, but we were working, or we were giving that organisation a little bit of space really just to sort of go through that process. So we've got the Wensleydale Railway Association, we've got the Upper Wensleydale Railway, two user groups there that are interested in the railway, or in the route as a railway primarily. And we've got reasonably good communication with both those organisations, generally, which is great. The section that we're really looking to open initially as a recreational route is from Hawes up to Garsdale, which is a 5-mile section. So in our current management plan, we've identified a number of targets, and one of those particularly is to develop 2 multi-user routes over the next 5 years. Hawes to Garsdale being one of those. At Hawes, as mentioned earlier, we've got reasonable establishment of visitor facilities. In terms of Hawes as a settlement, there's about 1,200 people that live there. There's another 700 or 800 within a 2 or 3 miles catchment. It's quite a lively little market town, particularly reliant on tourist facilities. There's the Wensleydale cheese factory there Wensleydale Dairy that produce Wensleydale cheese. They employ about 150 people. They have a strong link with farms in the area because all the milk for Wensleydale cheese comes from Wensleydale, apparently. It's quite a thriving little place. Up at Garsdale, that's very much at the other end. It's basically a station on a railway line. It's a small settlement there's probably about 25, 30 houses up there. But most importantly, it's a link back to the national rail network. So the Settle Carlisle is part of the national rail network. It's not a heritage run line, which some people often fall into that trap. And it also links with the Pennine Bridleway National Trail. So that's the national trail run from the Peak District up to the northwestern end of the corner of the Yorkshire Dales National Park now. Just about 8 or 9 miles north of Garsdale Station. So we've got a nice link there into the train network and the National Trail network. Land ownership. There are 20 landowners along the route, all private landowners. And then there are ourselves. We own a very small element of the land at Hawes, and North Yorkshire Council. They own a very short section of highway land, and Railway Path Limited owns some of the surface and sections of one of the viaducts. So back in 2020, we funded a feasibility study, and the district council that was around at the time, and North Yorkshire County Council as it was, also contributed to that. That was carried out for us by Arup, and they did a great job on that. So 4 points that came from that. Technically, it was feasible, but from a practical point of view, it was going to be possible to recreate that link, that physical link from Hawes up to Garsdale. There were some landowner concerns that came out as a result of that, and I'll talk about this a bit more shortly, but there were landowners there who gave us permission for the contractors to carry out the survey work, but weren't necessarily supportive of the principle. So that was nice, actually, that we've got a reasonable relationship, even with the people that perhaps aren't in agreement with the project. And a lot of that stems from the work that we've done, really, since this national park was created 70 years ago in terms of managing access. We've got a really good relationship with landowners and farmers. We're keen to use that to our advantage, but not to sort of abuse that, if you like. It was highlighted that there were great economic and health benefits. We're talking about £1 million per annum return. So it was really interesting to hear some of the stats that came out of the Peak Park earlier. And there were some possible alternative options as well, where we could not necessarily use the railway line, but still look at finding an off-road link linking Hawes to Garsdale. Perhaps we would just use other sections away from the railway line in places due to some of the practicalities of that route. So that was in 2020, and then we basically had, we had about 18 months before we sort of moved the projects on a little bit more. And really from March 22 to the end of last year, we had a series of papers that went to the authority. We got approval in principle to start carrying out some more detailed work, talking to landowners. We carried out a visitor survey to get, visitor and resident survey to get views on the project. We commenced landowner consultation. So initially that was carried out by our own staff, making that link with landowners that we already knew and had worked with for a long period of time. We then engaged a land agent after those initial visits, so they could work with the landowners or their appointed land agents on a more formal basis. And then back in last year, we gave an update to the National Park Authority just on whereabouts we were at that time. So the route itself, this is the 1 to 50,000 map. So we've got Hawes over here on the right hand side, and the route basically runs west up to Garsdale Station. Hawes is about 800 feet above sea level. Garsdale Station is about 1,100 feet. So that 300 feet roughly of ascent over that 5.5 miles is like nothing else we've got in the national park. For the best part of 30 years, I've been looking after public access around the Northern Dales, and it's a hilly old place, and we're constantly battling with the topography. And that's been really challenging over the last 10 years, where we've tried to do more work for Access for All. We've tried to look at short circular routes out of towns and villages to try and improve access for a wider range of people. And, we constantly find ourselves picking away at very small areas, short lengths, upgrading 1 or 2 styles that might initially appear to be a bit of a dead-end route. But we've taken advantage of those, and as time's gone on, some of these routes have grown incrementally, and we've ended up with some nice routes. But it is a challenging landscape to work in. And those who hear from the Local Access Forum will have seen lots of the examples that we've been involved in there over the years. So it's a no-brainer, really, in my eyes, that it's something that it's a worthwhile project. Really, at the moment, we're still investigating the feasibility, and the main work at the moment is trying to ascertain the cost. The actual cost of the physical work is fairly easy to estimate, but the work with the landowners and valuing land so we can create a public right of way across that land is a bit of an unknown factor to us. So hence our engagement with the land agency firm, and we can try and build up a picture of the valuation of those 25 parcels of land within that 5-mile section. Apart from the 3 authorities I mentioned earlier, sort of organisations, all the land is privately owned, so we're starting from scratch. We're knocking on doors and saying, we'd like to create a public right of way across your land. How do you feel about that? I'm sure you can imagine some of the responses. In terms of structures along the route, we've 56 what we're really calling sort of major structures. We've got 1 tunnel, Mosdale Tunnel, that's got small partial collapse in the middle. We've got 20-odd significant bridges. We've got 4 missing bridges. One of those is over the 1 road crossing, which is the A684. And it's probably unlikely to replace that bridge there. There's certainly workable options for creating a link down to the road, safe crossing point, and then back up to the railway line. And then a whole host of absolutely superbly constructed culverts that have really just been lost until now. Well, hopefully until now. So we've got some really nice railway infrastructure along there, and there's some of the associated railway infrastructure that comes with this. There's a number of plate layers, huts. There's various other pieces of cultural heritage that are alongside the route that that all can be incorporated into the project. This is very much typical of the trackbed at the moment. Between Hawes and Garsdale, very little of the trackbed has actually been bulldozed or taken away. If you go down the dale from Hawes, so heading from Hawes back towards Redmire, there's some longer sections there where the actual routes have been bulldozed away. So one of the reasons initially for looking from Hawes to Garsdale is actually physically a lot of the route is still there. We're also lucky to have a document that's now become known as the Book of Bridges. And this is a large book that's about 2 feet across and was drawn up by the Midland Railway Company, and it's got all the technical drawings for all the bridges and structures between, in fact, on the Settle Carlisle Railway and between Garsdale and Hawes. So that's a superb document to actually look at what's in place, what's been damaged, how things are constructed. And as a project the Dales Countryside Museum has been carrying out, they've restored that original book, had that conserved and produced copies that people can actually thumb through and work with. So that's really nice. And you can see that's an example there of Apposite Viaduct. In fact, the different watercolours on that plan actually represent the progress over 3 or 4 years of that viaduct being built. So really nice piece of history there. And that's the viaduct more or less as it is today. The public consultation survey that we ran for a couple of months, we had 2,200 responses to that, which is one of our most popular surveys that we've carried out in the National Park. And there's some stats up there for how often that was viewed online. The basic outcome, 77% of people agreed that the project was a good idea. 83% of the people that replied said they would actually use it. So a few people there obviously couldn't make their minds up at the time. Interestingly, 68% of those who replied were visitors and 22% were resident within the National Park. And you can see there some of the stats for people's primary use of such a route should it come into being. We would be looking to create a public bridleway on this route, so that would obviously be available to horse riders, cyclists, other wheeling opportunities, as well as walkers along that. Another shot here of a view that's typical along the railway line. So you've got there's a few short sections in cuttings, but the majority of it you're on embankments, and there's extensive views both up and down the dale. It's absolutely superb. And personally, for me, being involved walking along here with some of the survey work, you've just got into areas that I've been able to view the National Park in a way that I've never been able to view before, and yet been past it so many times. So see there, the track bed is pretty much ready to go in places. Mosdale Tunnel, this is a tunnel that's 245 yards long. It's a nice shot from inside, and is in fairly good condition apart from there's been a roof collapse probably about 4 meters in diameter. So there would certainly be some work to do there, but probably not beyond the scope of the project. And in my view, and certainly some of the feedback from Peak Park, it would be absolutely superb to be able to include that into the route. It's a really nice feature. All these sections of rail, at least a few photographs that you've seen of the route. Railway closed, didn't take the option of buying any land at the time, which obviously they did in some areas of the country where local authorities took that on. So hence at the moment we've got a few hundred metres of public footpaths that run along or cross under the railway line here and there, but nothing of any significance. So just a summary really of where we are at the moment. We're just trying to get a better handle on what the cost might be for the project. Practically, we're very happy with that. Actually engaging with the landowners, agreeing evaluation on their land, working through some of the scenarios that they've got, because most of the private landowners are farmers along that route, and they each use the local sections of that former flatbed in a different way. We've been very much down to the detail of their day-to-day farming activity. There's a great example with one landowner where a good chunk of their meadowland is wet meadowland. It's in a triple SI, so they're fairly restricted to what they could do there in terms of how they farm that. And they have about 700 or 800 metres of track bed that is dry former track bed along the route that is ideal for foddering belted galloways over winter particularly. It's the driest part of their holding almost. So for them to sort of lose that use, has quite a significant impact. And this is what we're down to, talking about this detail and the impacts on those landowners, and can compensation or valuation fully cover those costs. So it's interesting. Of course, all of those landowners are very different in how they farm their particular parcels of land. We're obviously working closely with North Yorkshire, trying to encourage them to give us a little bit more support. We're starting some conversations, or we've had some conversations with Railway Pass Limited, which are an interesting organisation to work with. And Obviously, there's been a reasonable amount of work internally within our authority developing the project. So that's about where we are. Elliot's just going to say a few words on the next steps.
Yeah, just to give you a flavour of what we've been since. Matt, you mentioned back in 2022 the principle of establishing that multi-use route by the authority. Since then, Matt's explained some of the work we've done there on establishing a preferred route alignment, identifying the land holdings, and then contact with landowners to start the conversations, listening to their practical issues and concerns like the one that Matt's just described there, as well as looking at the computation for the establishment of the route. So, and we've also been working on advancing discussions with key stakeholders, particularly around the liability of some of those major structures that you could see in there. So as we move on in the next few months, we're hopeful that by the end of March next year, we'll have a much clearer picture in terms of the landowner positions regarding the route proposals, and negotiations will be reaching a conclusion to get the first rights of way creation agreements in place if we can. So, and again, allied to the work around the structures, we over the coming months will be looking at carrying out some detailed survey work for the structures, because there was only sort of an initial assessment done under the feasibility work done back in 2020, and then working beyond that into looking at the necessary assessments, whether that's ecological, landscape, archaeological assessments that we need to as we move forward with the planning process for the project. So ultimately, it still feels quite early in the process, to give you more, particularly to give you a more detailed timescale in terms of the rollout of the project beyond today. So, but suffice to say, we anticipate the project through planning, development, and delivery will take several years to complete, and that's about as much as I would want to say in terms of the timescales on that. But thank you very much for listening, and thanks, Matt, for giving us a really hot history of the line and how the project's shaping up. And so thank you very much. And just stay, and I'll come back to both or move to.
Should we, I'll move on quickly. If there's any questions, don't know. Is it okay? Go on.
I'm just wondering if there's a bus service wasn't together, because if this was to be successful, it means might walk one way and be able to get a bus back out and get the train or get their car.
Yeah, there's a great community bus service that's run through the Little White Bus Company, which operate out of Halls, through Halls Community. That's an excellent service, and that's both timetable and on a sort of region-wide basis as well. So yeah, good opportunity there for people walking one way and getting the bus back.
It's Winter from the Department of Transport's next, but Sarah's just going to do a quick presentation finally about the Loon Valley work that Sustrans are working on.
Through discussion, taking our time a little bit. Working there is one of those very carefully over that. Because ultimately we're still working with these landowners to get access to carry out work from their land. Yeah, I'm genuinely hopeful about the project.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk today about railway track beds and former railways. Smarter, has any work been done looking at multi-user Smarter?
Just Rachel Briggsman, sorry, Rachel, on the spot, because Rachel's doing a project.
We are working on a project with who was going called Wakely Links, going in the opposite direction toward Oversteed. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the site, it's never been able to. They just let it be.
That's the landowner.
Well, the landowner is Cumbria Wildlife Trust. It's a nature conservation issue, really. Yeah, they.
Is that the fact that it's set for the sides? Anyway, I went now to left line.
It's real really an acceptable really go in the opposite direction as well from
Apologies for you having to dash up. But hopefully catch up with the earlier.
Okay, this is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour of our Loon Valley project, which just crosses over into North Yorkshire and to the border of the national park. So a bit of background to the programme. We've had a very large Just Trans team working on this since 2018, and we've been able to do this. The whole project has been funded by a private individual. A donation that's been made, several now donations worth millions of pounds to Just Trans to be able to do this, which also we're really grateful. And it is a greenway extension. So at the moment, there is off-road traffic-free national cycling network between Morecambe and Lancaster, and the vision of this individual, he wanted to do something for his community, was to have the route go all the way to Kirby Lonsdale, and now we're actually looking at taking that even further into Ingleton. So it will connect the communities along here. But also, we've got some very big tourist destinations, especially with the announcement that we're going to get Eden Project North, and also Ingleton and the Viaduct and things like that as well. Hopefully you can see where the route is going. So we've got Morecambe, Lancaster, the Castle to Bullbeck. So that was a Just Trans upgrade project of the Greenway last year. So we had Department of Transport funding, which allowed us to do some construction on that and bring it up to current standards. I'll show you a few photos of that. And then, yeah, as you can see, eventually we would like to be able to get it all the way to Kirby Lonsdale and down to Ingleton. And originally, I say it was going to stop at Kirby Lonsdale, but the reason for having to go to Ingleton is this busy road, which probably a lot of you will know, and the amount of traffic accidents along there. It's really not safe for active travel, so we're looking at a traffic-free alternative. So it's at various stages. So the only bit there where we've actually done construction at the moment is that bit that we did last year, Catton to Bullbeck. And then we're at various levels of design for most of it and feasibility. With the bit from Kirby Lonsdale to Ingleton is actually the bit that has had the least work so far. And we're sort of in discussion with landowners at the moment. That's quite an early stage of the project. So in total, we're talking to 117 landowners with 134 land parcels across a 40-kilometre route. So it's not a small project. We actually hope that we're going to construct the entire route by 2035 is our ambition. And it's the whole 3 miles of it within North Yorkshire, quite close to the national park. And just here's some of the work that we've done. So the top bit is the Catton to Bullbeck, one of the ramps. We've done feasibility and design work, and this is Jim, who you might remember from my earlier presentation on his e-bike. And we've been doing a lot of community consultation work as well. And there's me. This was an event that we held last year to celebrate the opening of the Catton to Bullbeck bit, and we had lots of family activities and things going on. And adaptive bikes to try out, promoting the accessibility of the route. I will just very quickly, I know we don't have much time, just show you a few of the, hopefully, or not. Any ideas?
It's turned off.
Don't know what's just happened. Oh, it was, oh, I think it might be, hang on. No, I was going to show you some nice photos. It might have just. I'm still not sure. Okay. Never mind.
See if I can extend its display.
Sorry, technical issues. It worked, didn't it? Ah, there we go. You've done it. Well done. Thank you. I'll just very quickly show you some before and after photos of the Catton to Bulbeck section that was funded with through Department of Transport. So I've got this nice little slider here. Here's the access ramp that was improved as part. Oh, it's gone off again. Okay, never mind. It was very nice. There we go. I'll leave it there.
So we're back in the on railway track.
The good news is I don't have any slides. Thanks everyone. I'm Chris Orwinson, I'm Captain Travel England, and I'm here to talk about the project we're doing with Rob and how Travel England wants to work in rural areas, because, well, as we'll get into that, I've got about 10 minutes of your time to talk to you today, so I won't sort of waste too much with preamble. Now I've talked about the fact I don't have any slides. But what I will start with is an overview of what Active Travel England is, because we're quite new, we're only just over 2 years old now, and we're an executive agency of the Department for Transport, which puts us in such august company as the DVSA and the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. So we're kind of a bit of a mix of things, but what we do is we're here to help local authorities and planning and development to make the government's target of 50% of short journeys to be walked, wheeled or cycled by 2030. We're currently, incidentally, at about 46, I think is the latest figure, so we're getting there, we're on our way up, but we've got a lot more work to do to get to 50%. And what does a short journey mean? Because in a rural space, we sort of, it came up earlier on, but you know, e-bikes have really transformed what is both the audience for walking, wheeling and cycling, but also the range and topography that we can use for walking, wheeling and cycling, which is really, I think, quite important. And the other thing that is very important for us, you may have noticed that we recently got a new government and that they have a new approach to transport, which is much more about integrating transport together and working to create an integrated transport strategy that has been written by our CEO, Danny Williams, who is also working as DFT's lead on the health mission. We'll come back to that in a second. But what I'm going to talk about integrated is that walking, wheeling and cycling and public transport work together really, really well. Even in rural areas, and indeed especially in rural areas, where buses can't go into every village, but are instead of running down to places like Connolly Lane End or Kilwick Lane End, you know, they're getting to near the village, but not getting into the village, then we need to make sure that people can access that bus route. Every bus journey, even if it is your village, starts with walking to the bus stop, starts with cycling to the railway station, whatever it might be that you're doing. So active travel and public transport go really well together. Furthermore, what's the main cause of delays to public transport? I'm talking about buses now. What's the main cause of delay to buses? Cars, congestion. Yeah, okay, right. What's the main cause of car journeys? Short journeys. What's the main alternative to a short car journey? Walking, wheeling and cycling. So if we can get more people to walk, wheel and cycle, not only can they get to the bus, but then the bus is going to be better. So everyone wins, you get a bit of a virtuous cycle rather than the vicious cycle that we're currently in. However, it goes well beyond transport and it's also about so much more. I mentioned the health mission earlier. Professor Chris Whitty, you might recall him from the period between about 2020 and 2022, we've got our screens a lot. He is on our board, and he is absolutely certain that prevention is still key to saving the National Health Service, and the best way of preventing a lot of ill health is through activity and overcoming that inactivity problem that we have. Now, one of the real benefits about the health element of transport and of active travel, and that goes well beyond the stuff we've looked at today about, you know, going for a fabulous walk in the countryside. We saw that only 1% of people who went for a trip in the Lake District felt worse after they'd walked on the path than beforehand. I don't know what they did. Did they break their legs? How did that happen? But you know, 91% of people felt better, and the mental health and physical health of a long walk is fabulous. But there's also the other elements of it too. And in a rural context, in the national parks, I've not set Rob up for this, but I'm going to assume that Yorkshire Dales is like all the other national parks and much of the rural UK area, and it's got an ageing population, it's got a declining population, it's got an increasingly unhealthy population. If we want those people to be able to stay in their community, to be able to age in place, support the community, support the local shop, we need to make it that they aren't dependent on a car, because one of the problems we've got is a lot of people are driving beyond the period when they either can or should. I'll leave it there. But what we need to do is therefore make it, if people are going to stay in those communities and stay there, they can have their friends around them, they can stay in doing their hobbies, singing in the choirs. I presume this hall is used for Amdram half the year round, you know, that kind of stuff. They can do that. And that will help them to live longer, better quality lives than if they get, oh, I can't drive anymore, time for my children to ship me off to a home somewhere, and I can just, you know, go down to Leeds and sort of just slowly be isolated from where they live their lives and need to spend their time. And it's not just about old people as well. I mean, if we can create it, that these places are walkable, cyclable, walkable, cyclable and wheelable, then, you know, we can attract new people into those communities. People move to the countryside or live in the countryside for a whole range of reasons. I do. I live there because it's quiet. I live there because it's green. I live there because there's a great sense of community. People move there for safety. Nobody, as far as I know, has ever moved to a village in the countryside from a town and gone, well, the main reason I moved here was because I wanted to be more car dependent. I just loved driving everywhere for every single thing I wanted to do. You know, that's not how it works. And indeed, that car dependency ruins that green environment, ruins that sense of community, because suddenly I can't cross the road in the village or go to the high street because it's full of cars. And especially ruins, of course, safety, children can't play in the street, and particularly the sense of quiet. Do you remember COVID, how quiet it was? That's all gone. Are there still birds? I've forgotten. Sorry. So, on that front then, there is perception that active travel, and indeed therefore ATE, has got a bit of an urban focus. There's a couple of reasons for this, and I think some of them are justified. You may not know that our main document, our Bible, at the moment, is a document called Local Transport Note 120, which means it's the first local transport note published in 2020, if you want to know what the numbers mean. And that is the Cycle Infrastructure Design Guide. And it's based on best practice, what we thought was the best thing we could do to encourage more cycling, not walking in the sun. And it's based on best practice, which came from places like London, Birmingham, Manchester. That's where, and to be fair, the cycle superhighway is in there. You know, there's some bits from there. So there are urban examples in there. It's about how you commute to and from work. The local cycling and walking implementation plans that we talked about earlier, that Rob was going through the process of, they too are based on how people commuted to and from work in sort of the 90s and the noughties, where the sort of entire idea it came from is you would say, where are your main journeys, where are your main trip attractors? Right, you've got this, it's an arrow, what's the most direct route you can get out of that? We can get people to cycle in. Great. If it came to walking, it didn't really do walking very well. I think anyone in transport would agree. Essentially, it came down to draw a zone on a map, call that the walking zone, see if you can make walking a bit better in it. Thanks. You know, it wasn't something we did because we hadn't really looked as an industry, this is rather than as a government agency or anything else, as an industry, we never really appreciated the importance of walking and cycling until more recently. We don't have 60 years of modelling and analysis and research to build on. But a couple of things have changed that for us and in general. One was COVID. Suddenly we realised that commuting to the office 4 days or 5 days a week wasn't the only journey that mattered because a lot of us weren't doing it anymore. And on top of that, we also realised that doing it in towns and cities didn't matter, wasn't the core focus solely anymore either, because people were moving to the countryside for that quiet, for that safety in the environment and all the things I talked about just a minute ago. So how can we revisit that and have a look at what we can do? So, Active Travel England, one of its first ambitions and ideas was to look at those two documents I just laid out and how can we revisit them? How can we make them more appropriate for the context in which we now live? So to start off with, I'll come back to the LC WIPS process. Now, we know it's urban-based, we know it's not regular walking, we know it's mainly cycling focused. We know that it is quite good, but it's quite cumbersome. I think anyone who's had to do one can agree. And how can we make that better and how can we make it work? Well, one of the things we're doing is we're working with all 10 national parks. This wasn't going to be our big reveal, but unfortunately, the fact they've all talked about it and there's photographs of me on trampers earlier, it's kind of stolen my thunder. But we're working with all 10 national parks to develop an LC WIP for each park. And in doing that, we're getting a really good understanding of how it does work in a rural context, what bits of it don't work in a rural context, how it works across multiple highway authorities, things like that. So that when, I say the word when, we come to look at how we can refresh the LC WIP guidance in years to come, we can make it a document that works better for walking and wheeling than it currently does, and a document that works better for rural spaces, so that rural authorities and national parks and other bodies, things like the National Trust, for example, can maybe look at how they would use this document to enable more short trips or medium short trips in rural areas by walking by bike. The other one I mentioned was Local Transport Note 120, and that is something that I'm currently working with some colleagues to not refresh, because it'll still do the same document, but to take and apply in a rural context. So that those examples from Manchester, from Birmingham, from London are great, but you know, outside is not the centre of Manchester, it's a different context, different solutions might be required. However, what we do know is that the principles are the same. The principles of LTN 120, and I've written them down so I get them right because I always get them wrong, are not on my piece of paper. Oh. What on earth will it? Anyway, I should know them off my heart. We can give it a go. Cycle routes should be direct, attractive, cohesive. We'll come back to that one. Did I say attractive?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Safe? Right, that's a support. Intuitive?
Coherent, direct, safe, attractive and
Do you want a job? That was the other one. Yes. So those principles still apply in a rural space. People don't have different demands because they're not in an urban area. It's just that the context of delivery might be different. How you deliver a safe cycling route in a market town might be slightly different to how you deliver it on a key bus corridor in an urban space. But we are looking at how we can do that. And crucially, two of the other things we are adding to LTN 120 to help work with the rural authorities is making sure that the business case process that we talked about a little bit today and the Water Greenway we were talking about earlier, how we can make the numbers stack up better. So it's great to see the numbers about spend, about recreation tourism and about cycle tourism and how that affects and changes things. You know, how we can help support local authorities in getting more money to build walking, wheeling and cycling routes. And the other bit we want to add to it is a whole section around the joys of, again, we talked about main day, land assembly. planning permission, how it works with the rights of way network, because obviously rights of way are a much bigger fact of life here in the countryside than they are, it might be the odd inn or in a country, in an urban environment. So how do we work with our colleagues at DEFRA to make sure that bridleways and footpaths are part of the network without the demand being that every single footpath is a 3 metre wide tarmac path, because A, that probably might destroy the countryside a little bit, and B, it's also going to be incredibly expensive and not practical. So we've got a whole host of stuff we're doing in this space to try and get us there. What we therefore need, might ask, from the august panel we've got in front of me today, would be, we want examples of problem areas, we want examples of good things, we want examples of bad things. We don't know, or we don't know yet, we don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the country. Much as we are a national body, there are 98 of us. We are not a huge organisation. We need to know what sort of problems people want that rural design guidance to help them solve. We want to know a good example of where something worked out really well. That example of the Loon Valley that we saw for 3 seconds just before I came up. You know, great, fabulous. Let's see if we can put that in. So that's why I'm here, is to kind of talk to you all, say hello, tell you the government does care, and we're here to try and make things better. And hopefully we're going to make the national parks and our rural areas not just better for people to visit and spend money in, but places where people can live, bring up a family, and indeed age in place. So that's it from me. I told you I'd be quick, Rob. And I think over to you now, isn't it?
It's me. I've only got 5 slides, so I'll go through these quite quickly. Thank you, Kit. And it's really good to have an overview of where Active Travel England are coming from and their kind of ambitions. So I'm just going to quickly go through our next steps, what we're doing next. This again is from those local cycling, walking infrastructure plans. This is a steering group that we're creating, guiding this active travel plan, along with key stakeholders, which a lot of you are here. And so we're starting with, and I think a lot of other similar national park authorities are taking the same approach of creating a steering group, which we, in the future, the plan is to upscale this to have bigger representation. But initially we're going for quite a lean approach because we've got to produce this active travel plan by March 2025. So there's a lot of work to do. So we've got the local authorities, representation from the highways authorities, our local access forum. There's 2 representatives from Sustrans, a disability charity, Wheels for All, the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust, and also from our committee. And this is kind of the structure. I won't go into this in detail of how we're planning on working as a core team with our local authorities, planning authorities, highways authorities, and transport planners. So I'll just stop. It's not in. That's fine. And I can share that if anyone's interested in seeing that. This leads on to the question that was asked earlier. So this is a press release that's just gone out this week. The public are asked for active travel wish lists in the national park. So currently there's a public consultation that's just gone live. We have stolen this from the Lake District National Park Authority. Thank you for doing all the work on this, and similar national park authorities are using this as well. And this is a means we're basically asking residents, visitors and organisations to suggest their active travel routes in and around the national park for walking, wheeling, cycling and horse riding. And that will be our kind of guide for the active travel plan that we're developing. A lot of talk, you'll have noticed there's a lot of talk of high-end, high-level infrastructure plans of, greenways, railway infrastructure, using dismantled railway infrastructure. What we're asking for here is from the smallest crossing that would help a student get to school to those Garsdale to Hawes or the Loon Valley work, and asking people to suggest those routes for people to get to shops easier, for people to cycle to different communities. So and this will be incorporated within that active travel plan. Within your little welcome packs, if you haven't got one, there's a QR code which will link you to the survey, or if you just type in active travel plan or active travel Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, you'll be able to get through to that. And we're hoping for a wide spectrum of people who will engage in that. There will be some follow-up as well, so we will be doing some webinars as well. We decided for this not to be a hybrid meeting, to get people together, to meet people who were interested in this, and then there will be some webinars because there were people who couldn't get here. It will be a similar flavour to today, but it'll be a bit more of a Q&A for people to ask questions. And also, once we've got a draft network from the public consultation and also the work that Sustrans have done, we'll be looking at that network, prioritising, and then we'll be doing workshops with the highways authorities, access charities, and different user groups as well. So there'll be another level of consultation, but a bit more workshop based. And come talk to me if you want to know a bit more about that. We're just hitting 1 o'clock now, which is good. So lunch is available. Thank you everyone for coming. And I'm happy to take any questions for any of the talks that we've had today. Or just very yeah.
We've heard lots of the difficulties of dealing with landowners, which slows everything down. Obviously, landowners have got rights which should be respected, and interests which they've got a right to defend. But the difficulty in making any progress here, if you want to build a road, you compulsory purchase action is taken, you can do it. It's so much more difficult with cycling. For many of the groups involved in campaigning, years and years go by, and if the landowners don't want to get absolutely nowhere, it also doesn't help if you haven't got a local authority, which is particularly supportive. But with the landowner proposition, is there any practical way you see of, without writing rubbish over them, of being able to shorten the process so that we can see progress and not have this constant frustration going on?
I think as the delegated highways and working with the highways authorities, we've just got to go through the mechanisms that are available to us, and those are quite difficult. I don't think Matt's still here, is he? From Yorkshire Dales to Hawes, and he could talk at length about the process they're going through in terms of that route. If you look at the National Park family and other local authorities, so like the Cinder Track in that links Whitby and Scarborough, they've gone for a permitted bridleway route there. Emma, what was the Keswick to Thunder? Was that a creation of?
No, it's mostly on our land, but we did have to negotiate a section.
Yeah, so it's a lot easier when it's in public ownership. And I suppose the ambition from us to do these projects, and the difficulty has been the councils haven't owned that infrastructure or ourselves. There hasn't been the appetite to do that, but I think that's changing a bit now, and this is why we're looking at this process. And throughout the plan and the prioritisation, Garsdale to Hawes is only a small section of that railway. In terms of active travel, Hawes to Aysgarth actually would fit a lot of the more for active travel in terms of the Department of Transport tool checker, because it's at the end of the day we have to evidence all of this. When I'm going through the process, different routes might come up higher and say this is more achievable, and that's part of the process that we're trying to develop now. Trying to get the evidence from people saying yes, I would like to get from this area to this area. One thing to mention as well, I haven't mentioned, is my remit is beyond the national park, very much beyond the national park boundary. That's why groups like Wharfdale Greenway are here, is linking West Yorkshire, Leeds, Bradford into the national park, because there's a lot of travel from that direction, and from the other areas, from Lancashire and Darlington, and we did try and get representation from all of the surrounding local authorities. So we kind of want the public to suggest those routes through the public consultation to give us that evidence. And we understand that it will be quite difficult with those negotiations and the compensation packages available to us as a National Park Authority.
Yes, if they, as well as the economic benefits, we really need to look at pushing the health benefits. The target public health.
Yeah, that's true.
Constantly getting emails, like the president of the NHS from the obesity pandemic and the rise in type 2 diabetes and all the complications, heart disease, high blood pressure, etc. And if we're really going to tackle this, it's not going to be through these new anti-diabetic drugs, getting people active, and for people who are sedentary, walking is the most easy way, and the health benefits would be enormous, and relatively short term, you get them fairly quickly, within a year or so, people changing, but they're only going to change because the infrastructure's there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And actually, as today was unfolding, it's a point that I haven't mentioned, and there are representatives from public health bodies here. And that's, that's part of the drive from central government to give funding to Active Travel England and look at that. And that's massively part of what we're looking at. And it will be incorporated into the Active Travel Plan and all those health benefits from, our local residents or visitors coming into the national park. Next, Peter. Sorry.
I don't know what we could do about in our response to the consultation about the roads and the traffic on the roads, and whether this work that we're looking at doing can impact that. I hear a lot of people, whether they're cyclists, walkers or horse riders, there's a conflict of traffic. And if there's anything that we can do to either lower speed limits or look at some of the...
I'll explain the process. It's a very basic process. You're not drawing a line. You're saying, I'll give the example, we're in Grassington now. I want to get from, you'll put a point at Grassington, you'll put a point, for example, in Skipton, and I want to cycle between those 2 points. And then you might comment on that. Is that a new route? Is that an improvement to a route? And you can suggest as many of those routes as you would like. You can go through that process. I've done it personally because I'm a resident in the national, and I just put in a crossing point across a road. So just a point, between 2 points, and that would be a really useful route for me. So I know what you're talking about in terms of conflict with highways and different use, but that's where we'll get all this information, and we need to talk with the constituent highways authorities about the solutions and what's possible. Because you might say you want a crossing point here, but that crossing point might cost millions of pounds. And we have to evidence that. And that's part of the work that I'll be doing, which is similar to the LT WIP process that local authorities do over the next 6 to 8 months of evidencing those routes. And then we can hopefully source funding. We can't do everything. We've got a huge area to cover. There's multiple honeypot destinations distributed. There's a lot in the Craven area, and that's why the Sustrans work's quite important for us, because it did give us a kind of areas of work to look at. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of public consultation we'll get from this process.
Yeah, I just see a lot of the barriers to people when they're looking at sort of selecting an active travel option. Like Kit was saying, in encouraging people to live better lives for longer, is that they look at the road network and they look at the traffic on the place and they just go, I am not cycling.
This is a long, I'm
not going to do it.
But that's happening across the country, isn't it? It's not just here.
It is also very personal.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's where Active Travel England are trying, he said they're quite new, and that's what they're looking at. And it's about investment and funding and that long-term strategic view on how we do this. And please come to me and come to me with your ideas or suggestions, and we can see where we can take those. So was there a question?
I'm just very conscious of time, so I'll be very quick. Thanks very much for putting today on. And I am a trustee of 2 charities based in Skipton, both community based. One of them very much around climate action. We support what you're saying about behaviours people possibly with help. One quick question, the points. Question is, I'm not clear how long the active travel plan is for.
It's going to be a 10-year.
10-year plan. Thanks very much. The other thing that I wanted to just mention was the Keswick presentation earlier. I was fortunate enough to walk that a few weeks ago, and the striking thing about it was how it was a very confident walk to route to walk in terms of the level and the appropriateness of the interpretation that was on there. So obviously a lot of thought and effort that had gone into the design of it, and I'm just thinking that was probably predicated on some really good community engagement, stakeholder engagement. And the other thing is that presentation was the first one that mentioned carbon savings. And it's just when you come to review the results of public consultation, no doubt you will have some criteria. But we've already heard about the importance of, economic benefit and understanding what that economic benefit's about. We've already heard about the importance of, looking at the public health side of things, and in particular behaviour. My plea is, can we also look at carbon saving?
It will be, and that's part of the process. Yeah.
Confidence in communities that are last to take up services. And here, I'm very much talking as a trusted charity based in Skipton, as community development worker in Skipton West, which has the most challenged communities in North Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Which would like better access to places like the Yorkshire Dales. There's a lot of assets there, there's a lot of skills, there's a lot of confidence. It's really important that we reach them. And so I'll be very happy to have a conversation with you on this, about how we can have some active engagement.
It's really interesting you mentioned, because that is part of our data collection process and how we justify in evidence. And I haven't really mentioned that today. And it was, and you're right. We've looked, we've had good examples from other national park authorities, and we're looking at Garsdale to Hawes. So we're quite at a starting in this process, and we're learning from other national park authorities, and that's great that we're all going through this process together. And we're all, as I was saying, we're all at different levels. But yeah, carbon will be part of that process. Yeah.
Picking up a couple of threads in terms of your comment earlier about the connections with the areas outside the national park.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely really important. And Mark's point about carbon and the thought that there could be some unintended consequences of developments of a route, say, the Horse Garsdale, that this might generate additional car trips, and therefore to people who come to Horse to cycle and use that route, as opposed to using a route that they could out of Skipton or West Yorkshire into the Dales. So that the carbon product of that would have actually negated the benefits of local people making local journeys.
Yeah, so we're kind of going into the micro outlook on this, which is really, it's really interesting you bring this up. The
level of target being significantly longer is actually quite large in terms of the carbon output.
Yeah.
Compared to the saving maybe locally in Horse Garsdale, whereas the saving someone coming out of Skipton is going to be, I think, greater. They might not choose to get in their car to start with to come to Grattington.
To add to that as well, one issue we've identified is the rolling stock on the Sale Carlisle line. It is not that much capacity there, and they can currently take 2 bicycles at a time, and they're not looking at increasing that. And that's where myself as a strategic lead, is trying to engage with Northern Rail and the new North Yorkshire Combined Authority and the other combined authorities on how we can influence that and change that. But there's other means that we can look at, and one thing that our chair of the National Park Authority has met up with the chair of Sustrans recently, and they were looking at a joint e-bike kind of resource around the national park and at locations like Garsdale railway station. So then it makes it possible with the current commitment. But that is something that we have identified, and you'll have noticed that it's changed from Horse to Garsdale in recognition to Garsdale to Horse, that we should be encouraging people to come into the national park, get to Garsdale station, and then actively travel to Hawes. But, and you're right as well, we need to be spreading that load and thinking about all the different networks within the national park. And that's part of the prioritisation process that we will be going in, you know, in over winter and looking at the network and what routes we are going to be looking at.
Thing to think about when you're filling in that consultation, and one thing I would encourage you to think about when you're filling in that consultation is the fact that if you wanted a really sensible, goes anywhere, active travel network that's already paved, it's about 3 meters wide, and it goes from village to village, and the trip attractors and everything like that, it already exists. It's called the road network, the quiet lanes that we already have, cross connections, they're already there. Trouble is that in certain places we fill them with cars. The thing to do with that is you can sit there and go, oh, alternative routes where we can make sure the motor traffic stays on that route, and then we can free up that route for walking, and cycling and horse riding. Because really what we're doing, if you think about that lane that's already there and suitable for active travel, if we then have to put in a pedestrian crossing, a bus lane, a protected cycle lane, a horse strip, whatever it is, all of that is actually the cost of maintaining through traffic on that road. It's not the cost of the active travel infrastructure. So, you know, when you're looking at that consultation, if it turns to go, this should be a great quiet lane, well, that's great. And it's also a really low cost intervention. If the highway authorities on board, 3-4 months, job done.
Yeah. Just going to take one more question, if that's all right, and then we can.
Well, this gentleman from Active Transport in England has made the point that we should not relinquish our roads to cars. As a road cyclist, I'm fed up. Well, I've noticed that cycling in the UK is Saturdays, and like now this consultation is sort of saying, right, don't cycle on roads. I am always going to cycle on roads. I'll probably be killed by one, but the idea that somebody with a very big mobile phone could drive down these filters and drive down these narrow lanes which are not built for them, and they can say, oh, these roads aren't suitable for cyclists. Cyclists built the roads. There's a very good book about it. So it's much better to have park and ride. You get all those tourists to park outside of the national park and come in on a bus than there is to have lots of people who don't know how to drive on a country lane coming in every weekend, and most of all the motorcyclists.
Yeah, it's a good point. The quiet lanes are part of what we're looking at, and already routes that we're already looking at. There's a few quiet lanes that we've identified, but those, and that's why we've asked the local authorities, highways and active travel departments to come here, because that's very much in their realm. A lot of what we're asking, we can't do ourselves. We have to make sure that we're working with those highways departments, because those changes we can't do. We as Matt was saying, we're delegated for the public rights of way network within the national park, but our influence on the highways network is dependent on our workings with the local authorities. And there are quiet lanes, I said, we have identified, and we will be looking at.
I'm just going to say about quiet lanes as well. You know, just as kind of, I think a lot of the publications have looked at old railways and greenways, that kind of thing. But definitely, our work with the national park, it does include quiet lanes as well. And you know, broader trans projects, we do look at quiet lanes. But there was a gentleman earlier that mentioned about traffic, and actually that kind of thing in these sort of consultations really helpful. If you could put forward, actually, we do support you know, speed reduction on this road. We would like to see this road an active travel route, because actually it can be highways that are quite difficult to convince. So I think, you know, don't just think of this as in greenways, old railway, public rights of way. Do think about your on-road infrastructure as well. And hopefully the rural guidance coming out will help that as well.
Thank you, everyone. If you're able to stick around, please join us in the Jackson Room for celebration.
Yeah,